Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you again for watching. Let me start with an interview I did with Charlie Robertson, who's the Global Chief Economist for Renaissance Capital. It was a long-ranging interview covering the global markets, covering emerging markets, frontier markets. Interesting. He was very bullish about Egypt, spot on. He's now very, very bullish about Pakistan. Do have a listen to what he's saying. He's got some great points about population, about a whole bunch of things, and really is a deep insight into what is a complex world that we find ourselves in. Macro thoughts, Raul GMI, the dollar funding squeeze is going to have some big knock-on effects, I think. Butterflies and hurricanes, he says. And I think I was wondering why we weren't seeing a dollar reaction in the initial throes of this squeeze, but now we saw it yesterday and quite a sharp move higher in the dollar. Market Ear, tremendous resource I recently discovered. We believe investors should be worried about the market's readiness for possible escalations in the fourth quarter by three geopolitical flashpoints: Iran, the trade war, and Brexit. And that's via JP Morgan, and I couldn't agree more. And I covered those three in considerable depth over the last year. I wrote something called the feedback loop phenomenon, and I was saying the most important currency to watch right now is the renminbi. The renminbi, let's take a look at where that is, 712.41. But you really need to keep an eye on that, and it's really the tool for China to strike back at Trump and his trade war. And Xi Jinping, I said in an article, is signaling he controls the console for the renminbi, and he's using that as a shock absorber. And that took me back to something I wrote in 2016, where I was quoting Don DeLillo: the specialist is monitoring data on his mission console when a voice breaks in. A voice that carried with it a strange and unspecifiable poignancy. Don DeLillo, extraordinary writer. He checks in with his flight dynamics and conceptual paradigm officers at Colorado Command. We have a deviate Tomahawk. We copy. There's a voice. We have gross oscillation here. There's some interference. I've gone redundant, but I'm not sure it's helping. We're clearing an outframe to locate source. Thank you, Colorado. It is probably just selective noise. You're negative red on the step function quad. It was a voice, I told them. We have just received an affirm on selective noise. We will correct Tomahawk. In the meantime, advise you to stay redundant. The voice, in contrast to Colorado's metallic pigeon, is a melange of repartee, laughter and song with a quality of purest, sweetest sadness. Somehow we're picking up signals from radio programs of 40, 50, 60 years ago. And I said then, what is clear that Xi Jinping has repelled the US advance, and this past week's renminbi price action, and that was when it blew through 7, was a message delivered with finesse and subtlety, and whose import cannot be ignored. 27th of May, I was saying that the Chinese-US trade war was going ballistic. 9th of July 2018, I asked, tariff wars, who blinks first? And I was playing on the James Dean movie, The Chicky Run. Now, then going to the other geopolitical flashpoint, Sterling, what's your road man? That was on the 5th of August. What's your road man? Holy Boy Road, Madman Road, Rainbow Road, Guppy Road, any road. It's an anywhere road for anybody, anyhow, where, body, how. And my question then and I think it still applies now, is can Prime Minister Boris Johnson self-eject Britain? Can he be stopped? This is a political calculation. And as I watched the pound fall like a stone, we fell below 120, and I'm expecting us to fall below 120 again, because we've wiped out all the sterling shorts. The path of least resistance is lower again. I could not help wondering if this sterling moment is precisely like it was in 1992. A no-brainer. Sterling, this chart is from T Commodity. We're currently at 123.5250. I'm expecting us to break below 120. Shehab Khan, it's put up or shut up time, source says. Downing Street source says that if the opposition MPs do not table a no confidence motion, they will view that as a sign that MPs have confidence in the government to leave the EU on the 31st of October. This is the Bloomberg Brexit Barometer via David Inglis. BBC Lorac, who seems to get a lot of inside news, probably from Cummings. 10 Downing Street suggesting if opposition leaders don't vote to bring them down tomorrow, which they won't, government will claim that means they back its Brexit position, which they don't. So either way, I think we're in a lose-lose situation. I think Boris is hurtling towards a hard Brexit, and I think Parliament, notwithstanding the Supreme Court decision, don't have any way to stop him without calling an election, which they don't want to call because Corbyn would get hammered. CEO turnover hit an all-time high in August. This is interesting. CEOs of WeWork, eBay, Jude stepped down. CEOs are now being held on a shorter leash, said Jeffrey Sonnenfeld of Yale's School of Management. I went back because I saw a wonderful image by David Yarrow of a tiger, and I went back to Wole Soyinka. A tiger does not proclaim his tiger tune, he bounces. Fabulous. And that took me back to The Tiger by William Blake. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain? In what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? There's no better time for that bird-watching trip. This is Lake Elementaita, beautiful resort Serena had. This was a few years ago when we went to visit, and you can see my Hannah, who's now 13, and her mother, it was many years ago, riding along the seashore at Lake Elementaita. Have a listen, because that's a Serena Hotels. I did an interview a few years ago with Mahmoud Jan Mohammed, who's the MD of Serena Hotels. It's out of date, but it's still on point. I've written about the Serena many times, and let me share with you my little story about Serena Mombasa. My memories of the Serena start in Mombasa years back when the managing director, Mahmoud Jan Mohammed, was the manager. I was then a teenager and remember losing my heart to a girl who beat me at table tennis in a bikini. That table tennis table is still there. The Serena brand has always been sprinkled with a fairy dust and reminds me of happy, joyful, carefree, halcyon days of youth. This is a photograph I took when I last stayed by the seaside at the Serena, I think a year or so ago. And this is another one many years ago of the swimming pool. It really is a lovely place. But my favorite is the Polana, which is the jewel in the Serena crown. And I wrote this in July 2012. I hail from Mombasa, and the Indian Ocean has always been of endless fascination to me. I recall dimly lit dhows in Jude Creek in Mombasa. Later, I read Felipe Fernandez Armesto, who said, the precocity of the Indian Ocean as a zone of long-range navigation and cultural exchange is one of the glaring facts of history, made possible by the reversible escalator of the monsoons. The reversible escalator of the monsoons allowed this cultural exchange from Goa to Maputo, from Oman to Zanzibar. In fact, my received history includes the narrative of a grandfather coming to East Africa as a stowaway on a dhow more than a century ago. And in 2012, Mahmoud told me, you should try the Polana and Maputo. And I kept thinking to myself, but Maputo was the furthest reach of the reversible escalator monsoon wind, the land of the most flavoursome tiger prawns, and I can confirm that. This is a photograph of the sunrise taken from the Maputo Polana Hotel in Mozambique. And then on this point of the Indian Ocean in 2013, I said, I have no doubt that the Indian Ocean is set to regain its glory days. And Andrew Corribico, the Indian Ocean region is expected to become the geostrategic centre of gravity in the new Cold War. He's completely right. And then I had the good fortune to interview a lady called Maria Lopo de Carvalho, and she had followed the route taken by Luís de Camões, a Portuguese explorer who took a boat and came all the way around the Cape of Good Hope and followed this 16th century journey from Portugal all the way to Macau. Again, that's the Indian Ocean as well. Political reflections, I waited and waited last night for President Trump, who was 25 minutes late for his presser. And he was terrible. He's become terribly Alfred Prufrock, I find. Let us go, then you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. That's a lovely poem. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells, streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. Emmanuel Macron in this video is seen speaking to Hassan Rouhani at Unga, and he's saying, if you leave the country without meeting with President Trump, honestly, it would be a loss of opportunity. The point, the overarching point, is Rouhani went on Fox and he spoke back to Trump that way, but he did not meet him and he did not shake his hand. And that is the point. And this goes back to something I wrote about on the 17th of June, the overwhelming confidence that Iran is displaying, both in rhetoric and action, is astounding, said Stratfor. Iran's President Rouhani accused the United States of merciless economic terrorism and of engaging in international piracy. After paying homage to the freedom seekers of the Middle East, read the Houthis, Hezbollah, the Assad regime, he then turned his eye on the most merciless economic terrorism imposed on Iran by Washington. It was international piracy, he said, and his country would never negotiate under sanctions. In this Sky article, agreeing with what I've already said, Iran's behavior this past summer has been brazen, but gone unpunished. Tehran has boxed Washington, Riyadh, and arguably London into a corner They don't know whether to hit back with a slap across the wrists or to do nothing for fear of war. Iran is emboldened. Rouhani spoke of peace and hope. Even the most dispassionate observer cannot expect either those when Iran is willing to mine ships, impound tankers, imprison innocents, and launch airstrikes on its neighbour. Our region is on the verge of collapse. A single blunder can cause a big fire, said Rouhani. I wrote about this on the 13th of May when I said this level of financial and coercive sanction warfare is simply unprecedented. That President Trump has been a big proponent of coercive financial and sanction warfare, and its expression vis-à-vis Iran is its apogee. I was quoting Hunter S. Thompson, there is no honest way to explain the edge, because the only people who really know where it is are the ones who have gone over. And that's the point. You've driven them to the edge, they've got nowhere else to go, and therefore they're going to continue responding in this manner, and successfully, I must say. And then in my article, after they struck deep inside the kingdom, drones strike deep inside the kingdom, I said that my mistake in that article of May 2019 was to assume Iran was at the edge, but in fact Saudi Arabia is at the edge. They just don't know it. Because those attacks, in my opinion, originated from inside the kingdom. That is the point. And it's cost you about $1,000 per drone. And $1,000 is better spent than billions and billions that they spend and make great hoo-has about in the White House. So, a very interesting situation, and also interesting at the moment for me is the oil price, which ramped higher, has come right back to where it all started. This is the time to get long, because I'll tell you one thing, they've proven they can knock Saudi Arabia right out of the game. And you can go and believe whatever you want from all these Saudi PR people who paid to say that the Saudi Aramco is coming back on, and forget it. Here's the people, look at this video, the people versus the police in Indonesia. This is from Jake Hanrahan. Here's a list of demands from what is apparently a new protest movement in Indonesia. Note this is bigger than just the anti-sex before marriage bill. And that took me back to President Suharto, who I met many years ago because I used to work at Sumitomo, and Sumitomo had a 50-50 joint venture with an Indonesian bank. And if you remember, the Asian crisis, Indonesia got walloped. And the Japanese said to us, we've got to go there, see if there's some collateral, and lend them some money and support them. And indeed we did. And we went to Jakarta, and we met with the President in State House, his Minister of Finance, the Governor of the Central Bank. And whilst we were in that meeting, he received a call from the IMF, and they said to him, look, we'll support you, but you're going to lift all your subsidies. And he turned to all of us in that room and he said, I'll be gone in a week. And indeed he was. Quite a story. Suharto, Muhammad Suharto, was the second president of Indonesia, holding the office for 31 years. International markets, this is the US 10-year yield, JS Blockland, it's got to 173. Interviewing Charlie, I suddenly understood that absolutely everybody believes that interest rates are headed just in one direction, and G7, that's lower. And it was very interesting. He compared it, going back to the medieval times and saying, actually, people were purely concerned with the return of their principal. But I think it's a Wizard of Oz world. This is voodoo economics. And just because we've not reached the point when the curtain was lifted in the Wizard of Oz and the wizard revealed to be an ordinary con man from Omaha who has been using elaborate magic tricks and props to make himself seem great and powerful, should not lull us into a false sense of security. And I think the entire bond market globally is in a false sense of security and is the biggest bubble of all time. Currency markets, let's go to the euro dollar, 109.52. Not looking that great. Dollar index just come off 99, 98.939. Japanese yen, 107.65. Swiss franc, 0.9916. The pound, where's that? 123.61. The Australian dollar, 0.6751. India rupee, 70.8388. South Korean won, 1198.72. The rial, 4.1489. Egyptian pound, confounding the naysayers, 16.276. South African rand, 14.9828. Watching the dollar index carefully here, last Monday I posted it had been forming a bull flag all month, and since then it grinded higher. Today it's attempting to break out at 98.80. That's Adam Mancini. Take you back to 31st of December when I was reviewing the year and looking ahead, and I said the direction of the dollar is therefore pivotal, and that at that point I was in a real minority and I expected the dollar to strengthen about 10% through 2019. I said, folks are keenly looking for chinks in the US economy, but essentially if the US economy slows, I wrote, I can guarantee you the rest of the world will slow further, and that's the point. John Althers, who writes this wonderful email I get every morning in my inbox, the dollar's just peachy with impeachment. The defensive allocation is driven by an extremely gloomy prognosis for the world, not necessarily the US economy, he said. The dollar spot index, which measures the greenback against other developed market currencies, is now at roughly its highest levels since the earliest days of the Trump presidency. King dollar. The euro, according to Raoul, is 2.8% off the very big level. I doubt it can break first attempt, but who knows? Currently at 109.52, and I think headed a lot lower, and I think now the catalyst for the move higher in the dollar is this more expensive funding or access to dollar funding. Euro banks, another perfect reversal on the longer term downtrend line, that's from the market ear. Bitcoin logarithmic chart, this is from Attila_09, where are we now? 8,385. Now this is another worrying thing, because I take you back to November 2017. I was very bullish at the start of November, 2017, and we're around 1,000, and I put it out as my trade of the year. And then I got out at around 9,500, and I quoted Hunter S. Thompson again, and wow, what a ride, I quoted. And I said, you will agree it's mind-boggling inflation. And in my experience, when I found myself riding a tiger by its tail, the key issue is the getting off. Or as T.S. Eliot said in The Hollow Men, between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act, falls the shadow, for thine is the kingdom. Now my point is, look at this chart and go back to 2017. The rally started at 1,000. What's to stop us coming down to 1,000? I mean, it would still be a bull market if you came all the way down there. The market here again, time for Netflix versus NASDAQ mean reversion trade. Take you back to my article over the weekend, Streaming Dreams, Non-Linearity in Crude Oil and Netflix. And I was saying, Netflix is more about the international opportunity, and that most of the analysts on Netflix were in the US, and therefore there's an international blind spot. And I was encouraging everybody to buy it at Friday's closing price of 270.75 and calling it a conviction trade, and then promptly it fell and fell and fell and got to think as low as 253. Well, we bounced back nicely yesterday. Let's see what happens today. Hopefully we'll cross higher than 270.75. Commodity markets concerns about global growth take Brent close to round trip the price rise after the drone attack. So that's my point. We'll come back now. This is the buy zone. WTI crude oil last at $56.30. I think it's a big buy. Gold, this is T Commodities chart again, 1507.75. What was interesting, it has diverged quite substantively from its normally inverse correlation with the dollar. And it's been much stronger than it should be given the strength of the dollar. Whether we're going to revert to the mean or whether this is a new normal is something we're going to discover. But a lot of support at 1500. But then, support can disappear over blink of an eye, as we've discovered. EM bond yields have declined to 5.3%, close to 2013 lows. That's interesting, isn't it? I saw South Africa were pretty sharp on the draw, weren't they? Sold a whole bunch of bonds. Smart people. US demands African countries avoid buying Russian weapons, says the Russian Foreign Ministry. We've seen attempts by a number of Western countries, in the first place the United States, to enhance their presence in Africa. In particular, they've been exerting major and persistent efforts with the aim to persuade some African countries, which are our long-standing allies, to give up purchases of Russian products, in the first place military hardware. The Russians have been intruding into Africa on the fringes where they can do commodity trades and secure the assets that they're trying to monetize. Burundi, the forgotten crisis still burns. This is Paul Nentulia. Mass atrocities and crimes against humanity committed primarily by state agents and their allies continue to take place in Burundi, according to the September 2019 report of the UN Commission of Inquiry on Burundi. They include summary executions, arbitrary arrests, detentions, acts of torture, and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment, sexual violence, and forced disappearances. The Commission has been investigating the Burundi crisis since 2016. Its findings mirror those of the ICC, which opened a separate investigation in 2017 based on a reasonable basis to believe that state agents and groups implementing state policies launched a widespread and systematic attack against the Burundian civilian population. The persistence of such atrocities echoes Burundi's 1972 and 1993 genocides and the brutal civil war that ended in 2005. Talking about Nkurunziza's decision to pursue a third term, coupled with the resurfacing of the Hutu nationalist agenda of his ruling CNDD-FDD party, triggered months of protests and a failed coup attempt in May 2015. It is estimated that around 1,700 people have been killed since 2015. The September 2017 final report of the UN independent investigation on Burundi, however, cautions that no one can quantify exactly all the violations that have taken place and continue to take place in a situation as closed and repressive as Burundi. The number of Burundian refugees has exceeded 400,000 out of a total population of 10 million, making Burundi a forgotten refugee crisis. At the same time, the state-sponsored militia, the Imbonerakure, those who see far, has been implicated in mass atrocities along with the police, intelligence and elements of the military. The Dondenza Help Me Find Them campaign has disseminated more than 400 photos of missing persons since 2015. Despite the information shortage, ample evidence points to a worsening situation. Atrocities by state agents are not confined within Burundi's borders. In 2018, International Refugee Rights Initiative documented attacks, killings and the disappearances of Burundian refugees at Uganda's Nakivale refugee camp. Burudi's self-inflicted political instability has directly impacted living conditions. Its economic growth shrank from 4.2% in 2015 to 0.4% in 2019, under the weight of high-level corruption and fiscal mismanagement. Since 2017, the government has been unable to pay civil servants on time, a source of public acrimony given that the state employs 80% of Burundi's salaried workers. Health sector has been particularly hard hit, only 500 doctors, effects are dire, 5.7 million cases of malaria, including 1,801 deaths reported in 2019. Of particular concern is the escalating tension between Uganda, the chair of the Burundi peace talks, and Rwanda, the EAC chair. UN report found that Burundi, the DRC, Uganda are now arming and training Rwandan rebels, adding another layer of strain to the already frayed relations between Rwanda and Burundi. The President's office now has the power to overrule Parliament. As the CNDD-FDD gears up for the 2020 polls, intimidation, disappearances, killings and ethnic rhetoric are all on the rise. While not yet announced, Nkurunziza is expected to run for a fourth term, extended to 7 years under the new constitution, and is entitled to run for a fifth term in 2027. Reflective of the personality-based political structure he has cultivated, Nkurunziza was officially named by his party as the Supreme Eternal Guide in March 2019. I wrote about Burundi in May 2015, and I said President Pierre Nkurunziza, a Pentecostal former aerobics instructor and rebel leader with his own presidential soccer team, Hallelujah Football Club, is now in the crosshairs. I was quoting Asane Njomo, a human rights lawyer in Dakar, who said, "All we expect from our leaders is the understanding that whatever was accepted 10 or 20 years ago no longer goes. What happened in Senegal and Burkina will happen elsewhere if leaders maintain their efforts to stay in power. There is an internationalization of African youth who are dreaming and thinking in the same way," said Barrow to Reuters. "They cannot imprison hope. They will fail. Youth will continue to mobilize," he said. I've got a friend in South Africa, and I've been following a guy called Obranji. I follow some of these folks, and the crime levels are just unbelievable. And then he said, my wife started a gun course this week. I'm not going to give you his name. Buying a Glock 48 for her. I've never in my life thought it would come to this. For the women, the rape culture is the worst. 120 reported rape cases per day. Many don't report. 55 murders a day. South African oil shares up 4.06% year-to-date. Dollar rand, bang in the middle of that 1550 range, 14.9833. Egyptian pound, chart from Paul Wallace. Very well behaved, I must admit. EGX30, which had practically eroded all its year's gains, bounced. It's up 4.29% year-to-date. That must have been about a 3.5% bounce yesterday. Nigeria all share down 13.2% year-to-date. Ghana Stock Exchange down 11.56% year-to-date. The caps are going to remain. Jude Njomo, who first pushed for changes in the banking laws in 2016 to introduce the caps. This is the rate cap. He told Reuters. Beijing gobbled up 87% of the cash Kenya spent on interest payments to its bilateral lenders in the year through June 2019. Beijing is also short of money these days. Venezuela, I couldn't believe this, is to fund a 400 million shilling rice institute in Busia. The institute will develop new breeding products for lowland rice ecologies and also come up with quality grain that has tolerance to major biotic stressors. This is curious. Nairobi all shares up 3.75% year-to-date. Safaricom heavily traded yesterday. NSE 20 down 13.63% year-to-date. Thank you for stopping by.